Hey guys, Clumsy here, and I'm happy to say, upgrade complete. I always wanted to say that. So yes, upgrade is a success. If you guys watched the previous videos, then you will know that I ordered the Ryzen 7 3700X. Oh, look at that. There's actually a... I thought there was a reversing truck. Apparently they crashed into each other. So yeah, we are now in Ryzen 7 3700X coming from a Ryzen 5 1600. Quite a big jump in terms of CPU. But then again, in this map, when we benchmarked it the last time, we already got very good scores. 60 FPS most of the time. So not really a lot of improvement here, but I did want to go and explore this road and do a test drive and also check out our FPS here in Tours, because here is where the frame rate drops have been last time. And let's go and pass by there. Yeah, 24-minute trip onto a very zigzaggy route. Let's do it. And I'll tell you some stories about the upgrade process, okay? There we go. Alright. Off we go. So thank you guys for all the support. Thank you for all the well wishes, because I really needed it. As you guys might know, I'm not a very hardware oriented person. I am very clumsy. So when something needs to be fiddled with my hands, it's not the best idea. Oh my goodness. And by the way, if anyone missed it, we are still in Grand Utopia. This is one of the new areas in 1.6. This is a standalone map made by my godness, the mod author. And my godness, look at how beautiful these roads are. Question is, how the heck do you even fit two cars here side by side? That's probably why they crashed into each other, huh? Then again, yeah, you can kind of fit, but one side of the truck will be on the dirt road already. It will be on the shoulder, quote-unquote shoulder. Man, this is looking really good, huh? So let's take a screenshot here. So yes, I got my... If you watched the stream the other day, where I streamed Planet Zoo, at the end of that stream, you can also check it out. It should also be in YouTube now. At the end of the stream, the delivery guy came and delivered my package for the CPU, the Ryzen 3700X. And so I did a little bit of unboxing, and from there we were able to give our well wishes. So after that stream, I proceeded to upgrade my BIOS and do all that stuff. Because a little bit of background, my system, coming from a Ryzen 1600, it's an old motherboard. This is an AM4 socket, if that makes any sense to the technical guys out there. But the thing is, it's a motherboard for the first generation Ryzen. So it's like 2 years old or 3 years old. Probably 2 years old, more than 2 years old. And get a little bit of retarder action in here, because that will be a very sharp turn. Yeah. Oh crap. Slow down. Almost fell over. Oh, this is nice. I love the railings here and the shadows, the shade that Natural Lux gives. Let's take a screenshot there before we crash into that car. Well, quick save, and I'll take the screenshot later. Oh yeah, here we go. Bendy bits all the way. Phew, this is tricky. Let's just enable the retarder here through and through. Take our time. There you go. So yeah, the upgrade process went smoothly, thankfully. I was doing a lot of reading beforehand because my motherboard is old. So I upgraded only the CPU and not the motherboard. Because AMD is such amazing, they're amazing guys that they made it. They promised that the next generation of Ryzen CPUs will be compatible with the old generation motherboard, so you don't have to replace the motherboard, and that saves like $300 more or less. So I was using my old motherboard on that new CPU, but it doesn't come, it's not plug and play. It's like it has to be, wait a minute, sorry, concentration, all focusing on the zigzag roads here. So the motherboard has to be updated, the BIOS, if that rings a bell, that term. The BIOS version has to be updated so that it will be compatible with the new CPUs. And it's not a straightforward update. I'm using the Gigabyte Gaming 3 B350 chipset. That's the term, if that's the term. It's a AB350 Gaming 3, I think that is. But anyway, it's Gigabyte. It's one of their low-end motherboards from first gen. So it's not the best, but it works. But the thing is, the upgrade process is not the smoothest. So just to share with everybody, so the version that I was at initially was F25, and then the target version was F42. Yeah. The problem was you could not just go straight into F42. You had to go through some intermediary versions. So before going to F42, had to go to F31 first. So from 25, where I came from originally, to 31, and then to 42. But at the same time, in addition to that, there were other prerequisites, like you had to install the chipset update, you had to install this firmware update, and there were a lot of horror stories. I'll take a photo here. I think this is going to look beautiful with that house at the back. So there were a lot of horror stories when they installed one of the updates. It was not very descriptive. Just, the Gigabyte just says in their website, install this. No mention of what it's for, and yada yada. So there's a certain sequence, and when people did that sequence, their motherboards crashed, their motherboards didn't boot up anymore, and stuff like that. And the backup BIOS was getting loaded instead. There's lots of disasters. So I was very scared. This is the number one reason why I was super nervous when I was still waiting for the package to arrive, because I was studying how to upgrade, how to update the BIOS, and yeah, I've been hearing all these horror stories. So I tried to study as much as I can, and I think Gigabyte fixed it in a recent update, because they released a new version of that notorious update just this October, even though the CPUs came out when, June, July, August this year. So they added an update. Oh, thank goodness, these guys are very nice. They actually stopped for us. Mount Saint-Benoit. Man, this is such a nice trip. You guys try it out. This is something that you really enjoy. This is like the Mexico Extremo of France. You'll have to be careful. But thankfully, the French drivers are very courteous. They actually stop and just don't ram into you like the Mexican bus drivers. If you get what I mean from the previous streams. So yeah, I had to update, and thankfully when I did my update, it was pretty smooth. Everything worked, and I found a way to update at the same time both the main and the backup BIOS. Because if you guys are familiar, I've been sharing it from time to time that my main BIOS was corrupted. So I've been living off. I've been using my backup BIOS all throughout, like, I don't know, for maybe 6 months to a year now. And I could not turn off my PC. Well, I could, but I could not cut the power off. Like the switch, the power, had to be like, lights on please. It had to be, wow, this tunnel. How do you fit 2 cars in here? Goodness. Let's see if this is a nice photo. If we take a photo here later. Oh yes. Oh yes, that's going to be majestic. Yeah, I think I like that better. Very scenic coming out of the tunnel like that. So, what was I saying? the backup BIOS. I was living off the backup BIOS for around 6 months to a year now, because if I boot up using the main BIOS, it just continuously restarts. So I think I corrupted it when I was doing some overclocking settings, and I cannot even enter the BIOS screen from there. So and I could not update the BIOS because updating the BIOS needs you to be inside the BIOS screen, and I could not even enter it from the main BIOS. So basically the backup BIOS is the only thing that was working. Alright, everyone with me so far? I hope so. If not, rewind a bit. Okay, but thankfully I saw when I was updating I was downloading the latest BIOS, the F42, if you still remember, that there was a readme file and there was this DOS executable. And apparently there's an option now, maybe it has been already there before, there is an option to use that utility using DOS. So I just had to make a bootable USB drive via Rufus, I think is the software. But anyway, the bootable USB, oh, you might be getting a bit of lag. My GPU is having a hard time. Hang tight. 91%, 92% load and rising. So there is this DOS utility that can update the BIOS at the same time, both main and backup BIOS, and I don't need to be inside the BIOS screen for it. So it's perfect for my needs. So that's what I did. From 25 I updated to 31 using that method, and then I installed the notorious software, which went smoothly, thankfully. And then I installed the F42 BIOS, updated it, both the main and backup again. And then I tried powering the PC off, turning off the switch for a few minutes for the first time in a year or so. And then I booted it up, and it booted up. What happened? Low air pressure. There's a warning. I've been braking so much that my air pressure has stopped building up. Look at that. Yeah, these guys are very nice. They're actually stopping for me because I'm taking up all the space. Now, I'm not sure if I can return the kindness because you might have gone a bit too close there. So we might need to like probably smudge each other. There you go. You should have stopped a while more back there. Didn't give me enough space. So normally in this case you would stop and you would rev the engine so that your air pressure will build up again. But I don't have that simulated in the settings. I turned it off because I hated waiting, having that beep in waiting. So right now we can still drive. But here, okay, I think we are done with the dangerous part. Okay, look at that. Beautiful, overlooking that highway. Come on, really? Good luck. He lost his left side mirror. Look on the road. He smudged. He was so hell-bent on overtaking, he was willing to sacrifice his side mirror for it. Anyway, so I was able to update my BIOS to F42, the one that's compatible with the newer CPU. But I still had the old CPU installed, so it was booting up to Windows fine and everything, so that was a very good sign. So when that was done, I then turned off the PC, had my lunch first, because it was lunchtime and I was super hungry, so I was cooking while the motherboard was updating the BIOS, and it all went well. So after my lunch, I disconnected all the cables, opened up the PC, and this is when the fun really started, because the hardware, I'm really bad at hardware. So I'm clunky, I'm clumsy, you guys know that by now. So yeah, it was a kind of a hard thing. Speaking of hard things, that mountain pass right there was very challenging. But we are over that now. Can't say we'll have a good fuel economy score though. What the heck is that? Where did that truck come from? Huh? Yeah, that probably was a blind spot right there. I remember we looked right, but I didn't see anything. Can you guys check the replay and double check if there was a truck there that I didn't see? Goodness. And look, the low air pressure warning is gone. Oh, and look, no more sports cars. I removed the mod already. So more realistic cars now, just modern and classic cars mixed. That's it. That is max retarder already, guys. That is max retarder, and we are barely slowing down. Avoid the bucket of doom here on the right. But thankfully we have a wider road now. So I rip on that trailer. Oh dang it, 1% damage on the cargo. Dang that truck. Goodness. We passed through the mountain pass without any... Well, we crashed into a truck, but it was his fault. And then at the end of the pass, when we thought we were all clear, I made that left turn, and that's when we hit this guy. I could think of so many words, but I cannot say it in this video. So that guy. Anyway, back to the upgrade story. So the real fun started. I loosened my CPU cooler. I'm using a Cryogen Cryorig H7 CPU cooler. Very nice, very much more powerful than the standard CPU cooler. That's what I'm using. So I loosened it and removed it, and yeah, all the thermal paste in the world from my previous application. And I used a little bit of, well, a lot of coffee filters, because they say the best cloth to wipe. Actually, I could have used that turn, huh? Not this roundabout. Anyway, that works. So, but at least here we have right of way. Nah. Okay. So, what was I saying? The coffee filters. They say the coffee filters are the best way to wipe off the thermal paste. Coffee filter with alcohol, isopropyl alcohol or stuff like that. 90%, 99% or 70% should be okay. So I did that. I used, I don't know, around 10 coffee filters to wipe off all the thermal paste, and it was all over my hands. But that was fine. So eventually I cleaned up the CPU cooler. I cleaned up the old CPU, and now I was ready to I removed the old CPU and put the new one in. Yes, and then I applied a smidge of thermal paste in the middle, a pea-sized application of thermal paste in the middle of the new CPU. If you've watched any of my PC building sim videos, you know how that should look like. But to be honest, it didn't look that pretty. It was very clunky. So I was very paranoid. If I applied, is that enough thermal paste? Should I apply more? Should I do this, do that? But yeah, at some point you really have to let go and just do it. So I left that alone, and then I tried my best to put in the CPU cooler. Now, a custom CPU air cooler is a very monstrous thing. Yeah, it's so hard to install for me being a clunky guy. It's so hard to position, and you have to position it right, because if not, then you'll smudge the thermal paste all around the CPU, and you won't apply it perfectly. And so I think I smudged it a little, but I just pushed through with it, and somehow I was able to lock the darn thing in, the CPU cooler. So when I locked it in, it looked nice. It looked snug. I screwed it in tightly as I could. I then kept it open and just connected all the cables and booted up. And it worked. Tada! It worked. It booted up. No problem. Well, initially it seemed like the resolution was low, like the graphics card had to reinstall itself. Seemed like my audio drivers had to reinstall themselves or something, and all the peripherals, but I didn't have to reinstall Windows. Everything was just doing so in the background. Oh, this is a good test. Raining and tours will be a good test for the CPU, but I think actually my GPU will max out way before my CPU gets taxed. So anyway, upgrade complete. It booted up to Windows. Eventually, my graphics card, my native resolution came back, so that was good. And so I restarted my PC and enabled the XMP profile on my RAM. So my RAM module is rated at, or can be overclocked to 3200 megahertz dual DIM, or however you call it. But by default it's only 2600, so you have to enable the XMP profile. And there were problems with it before with older BIOS versions that it didn't really work, that XMP profile, that you had to manually overclock your RAM or something, and I didn't want to go through that. So I was hoping that it will work, so I simply enabled XMP profile. So it was just like a simple drop down menu in the BIOS screen. Save, exit, let it load, and it worked. So no additional steps necessary. When I double checked my stats, yeah, it's 3200 megahertz. Well, 1600, then dual memory, so it's 3200 all in all. And so that worked without a hiccup, and I did my benchmarks. The scores were amazing. It was like almost double the performance from the 1600 because I updated. The upgrade in effect was 2 generations more. It's a different, it's a 7 nanometer architecture, and it's even without all that, I upgraded to a different tier. Instead of the 6 cores 12 threads from the 1600, now with the 3700X I'm on 8 core 16 threads. So I added 2 cores, I added 4 threads basically. So that's even more productivity there. Yeah, so I should be able to stream and handle all the CPU things even no problem, and rendering should be much faster. That's why from a CPU benchmarking perspective, if using all threads, I'm getting almost double the score. So that's amazing. And then I had to work, so it was a bit of a party pooper because I still had my full-time work. So I had to work, and while I was working, I was running the benchmark. I was running Prime 95. Some folks don't like this software because it's very synthetic. It doesn't reflect real life. How do you say? Loads, but it's a good way to stress test the system. So I ran it for a couple of hours while I was working, and it seemed stable. The temperatures were like 60 plus degrees Celsius, the CPU, and yeah, it was very good. It was very nice. And if you're familiar with the technical lingo, even my VRMs are better now. My motherboard VRM temperature is much better than before. I don't know why, if it's the CPU, if it's my installation, maybe I did something wrong before, or maybe it's the CPU and the BIOS doing a much better job at cooling itself. Right, so we got a bit of lag there, which I'm not sure where it came from, to be honest. But yeah, when it's raining, you get a little bit more laggy. But my GPU wasn't overloaded. My CPU was starting to struggle because ETS2 still does not utilize multi-threading evenly. There's still some main cores in here. I see 2 of my threads which are very highly utilized, like at 60%, and the others were like 1% or something. 10% for others. I'll try to share with you the monitoring tool I'm using. It's very nice, very visual. It's called the HW Info Gadget or something. It's based on the info from Hardware Info. I think that's the term. think that's the software. So anyway, benchmarks were good, everything was stable, so I started playing, and the first thing I fired up was X-Plane, because that's the one with the biggest frame rate difference. Yeah, we still get lag here. I think it's just an engine limitation at this point, with the rain particles and all that stuff. So I fired up X-Plane. I loaded the entire the exact same scenario, so the same place, the same time, even the weather, because I'm using Active Sky XP. You can simulate a particular real weather on a specific date and time. So I decided on that. I ran a benchmark before I upgraded, and now after the upgrade I ran the same thing, and it was glorious. It was it's not perfect still because it's X-Plane, but it's much better. Like, I was initially at 22 FPS on average on that particular scenario, and then I was measuring the 1% lows and 0.1% lows. I was getting like 12 FPS, 0.1% low, so 12, and so 22 on average, and it dips down to 12 at certain times, 12 and 15. And then when I reran the benchmark, same settings, the average was now I think 40 something, so I gained like 40 FPS and 20 FPS on average, and that's huge. Imagine gaining 20 FPS. That's essentially doubling my frame rate, because if you imagine, I only had 20 FPS. So plus 20, I got 40 now, and it essentially doubled. So I was like, woohoo, this is cool. And then I tried tweaking and increasing the settings, the visuals, and my frame rate is starting to suck again because I'm increasing the graphics quality now. But yeah, it's amazing. So that works. That was a huge win, and I'm excited to try it out more. Didn't have much time yet though. I also got myself a new game. I won't be streaming this. I'm not even sure if I'll be playing it. But I got a free game that came with the CPU. Apparently there's a free game promo. So I had a choice between Borderlands 3 and Outer Worlds. If you guys are familiar with those. I ended up choosing Outer Worlds because it had a higher rating. It was released later, and I heard Borderlands 3 is not quite good, except for the hardcore Borderlands fans. So it was not so groundbreaking from the previous Borderlands, so I decided to go with something different instead. I finished installing it, tried it out, it was super smooth, and I like it. Although I'm not sure if I can devote that much time to play it. And I probably won't be streaming it because there's violence and there's language, so it might not be very fitting for the channel. What I did notice in the new Ryzen though, I think they call it Precision Boost 2. It's a very smart technology. Like, I don't have any overclocking settings at all. Everything is stock. But based on the tests, based on the reviews that I've watched, overclocking the 3rd gen Ryzen has almost no visible benefit. It even lessens the single core capability, which is something I'm really looking forward to, because X-Plane requires that and ETS2 requires that single core function. So yeah, it's let me try to turn off the weather here just to see if this will be smoother. Yeah, that's a lot smoother. That's a lot smoother. Yeah, there's really some engine limitation when it comes to displaying all those particles. Okay, I think we're parking this again here at the edge. You guys remember this place? Yeah, that's the one. But this time there's no more detour. We didn't have to go through a detour, so that's good. Yeah, look at how smooth this is comparing to the one with the rain. So yeah, huge benefit when it came to X-Plane, huge benefit when it came to my rendering. I did a test render. I recorded an ETS2 trip. So I did a frame rate. I did the benchmark. So the benchmark episode, I did almost that exact trip. And unfortunately, I did not get any better scores because we were already at 60 FPS there. And the lows were like 45. So it was like same score. Same score essentially. Which proves that for this particular map and this particular truck, that particular area we've driven in, I was not CPU bottlenecked. It was more GPU bottleneck. But I mean, well, that was almost 60 already, so I don't think there's anything to complain about. Shoot, this is tricky. Start to turn bit by bit. So I'm really happy with the results, and this Ryzen is pretty smart. So it kind of changes the voltage and everything on its own, and it tries to kind of like overclock certain cores depending on the need. Like if it detects that an application is trying to utilize only a single clock and not the others, then it tries to boost that to a higher frequency, something like that. No one saw that. Not the best angle of attack, not the best approach here. Let's make this right. Trailer damage 11%. Oh my goodness. Whoa! Where did this guy come from? Man, filled with idiots on the road today. Okay. And here I was saying that French drivers were very cautious. Apparently, there's always an exception. Okay, looks good. So it's very smart. And from an original like 3.6 gig clock speed, it can boost all the way up to 4.3 or 4.4 gigahertz when needed. So when gaming, it's increasing the voltage and everything, and trying to boost that much to get the best frame rates for the single core games. And it's proven that I've seen it does that for X-Plane, and here for Truck Sim as well, looks like. But it doesn't need it as much for Truck Sim, at least, because yeah, GPU is my bottleneck here. Good. Right. Yeah, so overall I'm super happy with the purchase, and really looking forward to testing out the different combinations. Oh, good work. Haven't gotten that in quite a long time. Goodness. But it's okay that we get a crash here and not a crash in the upgrade process, right? Anyway, so I'll try to tell more stories as we go in the next stream. I'll try something new. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed that little short trip, that little test. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Catch you in the next video, okay? Clumsy Trucking, and bye-bye. See you soon.